We do have one more story again, and I still want you to remember the theme, which is it's all corporate. Because there seems to be this theme that I've noticed, in particular with the Democratic Party, is that you have Black Democrat politicians that are there to look like they represent Black voters, Black people, but they are operating to benefit other groups. Case in point, Raphael Warnock. Raphael Warnock is here with Zelensky, right? Look at him shining hard, just shining all hard. Raphael Warnock right here with Zelensky. Raphael Warnock was one of the candidates from Georgia who ran. And remember what Joe Biden told you? He said, if you guys vote for Warnock and Ossoff, I'll make sure you get those $2,000 checks. Wasn't $2,000. But that's where Warnock came from, right? And at that point, I believe for him, it was a special election. When there was a re-election, it was kind of close between him and Herschel Walker of all people. It was just ridiculous. But the point is this, folks. People voted for Raphael Warnock because they say he's going to go in there and he's going to fight for us. He's going to fight for the Black community. But that's not what Raphael Warnock has been doing. So you see, you have Raphael Warnock here schmoozing it up with Zelensky, and he tweeted this, not me. This is his own tweet. President Zelensky is an ally of our country who protects Americans' freedom by holding the line against an authoritarian regime. He doesn't bow to dictators, neither should our leaders. Okay. Is an ally of our country. Now, see, I want to take you back because when this war first started, myself, Garland Nixon, my comrades at RBN, we were one of the few that told you the truth about what was happening to Black people in Ukraine. And then just in case you forgot, we can go back through the line, right? I remember what happened to the African students. Some of you may remember, some of you, it may be your first time hearing this. When the war first started, listen to what happened to the African students in Ukraine.
I was begging. The official literally looked me in my eye and said in his language, only Ukrainians, that's all. That if you are Black, you should walk. I'm currently in Debrecen, Hungary. I got in like 10 a.m. today. Today is the 28th of February. It wasn't easy. On Friday at 8 a.m., I was on my way to Poland. I took a commercial taxi and the taxi couldn't stay on the line of cars because literally cars have been there for 2 days. And when we dropped, on the Google map, it was saying a 1 hour walk. And I was like, a 1 hour walk is nothing, if it's getting us there on time. And we walked and it kept increasing. The term walking is traumatizing me. The term walking, I walked for 12 good hours, and it's not an exaggeration. The traffic warden saw me and said I should go to a shelter to sleep, and I slept, and he said the next day that there is a bus going from that shelter straight to the Polish border. And when it was time to get on this bus, the Ukrainians said, just Ukrainians, literally as a Black person. I even lied that I was pregnant. They didn't care. I was begging. The official literally looked me in my eye and said in his language, only Ukrainians, that's all.
That's all.
If you are Black, you should walk.
If you're Black, you should walk. Now, not everybody knew about this because the people with the larger platforms weren't telling this story. And I got to tell you guys, this is what I said before. You have Black politicians out there rubbing elbows with Zelensky, saying this is an ally. We got to protect them and da-da-da. You are talking about, and I'm not talking about just racism. They are totally ignoring the Nazification in Ukraine. And I don't mean it's just a couple people that say, oh, this is what I believe. I'm talking about it's embedded into the culture. It's a problem. And I'll show you in just a second how our own Congress acknowledged that this was a concerning issue back in 2018. Let me let her continue.
And that was an additional 8 hours from where we were. By car, it was like 30 minutes. So we had to walk additional 8 hours. The problem isn't at the Polish border. It is at the Ukrainian border. Because you have to step out at the Ukrainian border to get on the Polish side. And the Ukrainians are only prioritizing their citizens. They don't care. They will push you. They will beat you. If you can make it, you make it. If you don't, you don't. Like, I took a nap and I still felt like I was still walking, like I hadn't crossed over. It's not fair. Like, we're just begging to go. I literally had to go back to my city after that experience, re-strategize, and took a train to Hungary. It wasn't even easy getting to Hungary. We had to pay. Those that didn't have money to pay, what would they do? I couldn't help anybody because I was fighting for my life. It is a traumatizing experience, and I don't know where I'm going from now. I literally have to re-strategize in Hungary, try to get my ticket back to Nigeria because it's not safe. This place is not, if your skin is dark, you're at a disadvantage.
And that's what I was trying to warn people about. When there were even Black people who said, oh, I want to go sign up and volunteer. Now, fortunately, the Peace Corps did sound the alarm about that to people. And I want to go ahead and show you guys that because people didn't want to talk about this either. When this war started, the Peace Corps posted that as a Black person, you will run into issues in Ukraine. And I tried to tell people this before, as someone who has lived in Europe, you have to understand as you get further and further away from the West and you get to more of those Eastern European countries, it changes. It's different if you're Black and you go to Germany. It's different if they're used to seeing you. They see you, there's military bases in Germany. They're not like, oh my God, it's a Black person. It's a little bit different, right? It's different if you're Black and you go to France. But as you start to move towards, like you're going towards Moldova and like Ukraine, it's a very different environment. Now, the Peace Corps tried to warn people about this. Atlanta Black Star even covered it. It said it does not justify it. Peace Corps guidance for Black volunteers in Ukraine caused a stir after being exposed on Twitter. Listen to this. Bring this up because they got a lot of heat for this. Peace Corps positions in Ukraine are currently not open, but Black Peace Corps volunteers who applied were warned to be prepared to be called the N-word and face other racist behavior while in Ukraine, according to guidance on the Peace Corps website that is currently being discussed on social media. Let me get into this a little bit more here. The warning, which includes personal accounts from volunteers, calls from having thick skin and an understanding that racial discrimination comes from Ukrainians' lack of exposure to Black people. It is not uncommon for Ukrainians to refer to African Americans as N-word. Volunteers of color may be called a monkey or may see children's games with Black face. So you see, when I pointed this out at the time, I was called a Putin puppet and all these types of names. And a lot of these other bigger channels on the left were not talking about this at all. It was mainly Black commentators that were talking about this. Myself, Garland Nixon, my comrades at RBN, I think Gray Zone, I think Max Blumenthal touched on this a little bit on the Gray Zone. But they were ignoring this. This is incredibly important. This is what you were getting yourself into. Being aware of the history of dehumanization for people of African descent may help inform where this comes from. It does not justify it. It will be at your discretion to determine the intent. The warning builds on recent reports of discriminations against African students in Ukraine choosing to study in their country for a cheaper living and more accessible education. So there's one other part here that I want to mention. it says here, Black volunteers may face far more complicated issues. According to accounts of unnamed volunteer, the organization blames the discrimination on Ukrainians' lack of exposure of Black people. The understanding of African-American culture is fueled by the media and African stereotypes. You will generate lots of interest and curious stares. And that's one thing, but it's one thing for someone to stare. It's another thing for the way that they would treat you. So these stares can make you feel uncomfortable and annoyed. Ukrainians' initial perception of you may be that you are from Africa. It may not. It does help if they understand you are an American. Isn't this crazy? And the training in PST will help you consider ways that you will engage with these assumptions. Why would you put yourself through that? Like, that's what I try to tell people about these Eastern European countries. And they have statues. They have little statues of soldiers that are Nazis. Like, this is not, it's not like this is just some little fringe group in the country. No. Did you know that while some of us were marching for George Floyd, you know what they were doing in Ukraine? See, shout out to Margaret Kimberly for this. White lives matter more in Ukraine. Margaret Kimberly tried to sound the alarm about this. So you can see this here again. It says in 2020, a group of football fans at a match in Ukraine unfurled a banner reading "Free Derek Chauvin," yada, yada. You guys know who Derek Chauvin was. It says here that this resistance marched on October 14th, 2020, with a banner that made the point very clear. The words "White Lives Matter" were written in English and in much larger type than the name of the organization, which appeared in a small type below. October 14th is celebrated as the day of the UPA, the Ukrainian Insurgent Army, which fought alongside Nazi Germany after it invaded Ukraine during World War II. So you see, this is another thing that you don't hear a lot of the politicians mention when we talk about this. Who was fighting with the Nazis and who was fighting against them? Remember, Russia was fighting against them. See, people don't want to get into all of this, right? Because when you get into all of this, it makes people like Raphael Warnock look like a clown. That's why people don't want to get into all of this. It make you look like an Uncle Tom. It's a hot mess. A hot mess. And to make it worse, there was a letter. The letter went out in 2018. Now, as you can see here, this is Rocana, 17th District, California. Hold on. Okay. April 23rd, 2018. This was during Trump's first term. This letter was addressed to the Honorable John Sullivan. This is from the House of Representatives. If this is the first time you have seen this letter, in the chat, say first time. I'm curious. We're not going to read the whole thing, but there's one part you really do need to see. Look at this. Deputy Secretary Sullivan, we write to express our dismay about recent reports of state-sponsored Holocaust distortion and denial taking place in Europe, particularly in Poland and Ukraine. These developments are unacceptable, especially given today's global surge of anti-Semitism. Listen to this. We urge you to join us in human rights organizations in standing against anti-Semitism, xenophobia, and all forms of intolerance by calling for Polish and Ukrainian governments to unequivocally reject Holocaust distortion and the honoring of Nazi collaborators. 2018, this letter went out to John Sullivan from the House of Representatives. Listen to this part right here. Ukraine 2015 memory laws went even further to glorify Nazi collaborators and making it a criminal offense to deny their heroism. However, unlike Polish law, this move by the government in Kyiv has received little to no public response from the United States. The groups and the individuals extolled by Ukraine include Nazi collaborators. This is Stepan Bandera, Roman Shevikolik, I don't know how to pronounce the last name, and the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, as well as the Ukrainian Insurgent Army, which I just showed you from Margaret Kimberly's article. So the same people that many of us in independent media that were trying to warn people about Ukraine were telling you about, Congress had already mentioned those people in this 2018 letter. And what is hilarious to me is that a lot of people and even so-called independent media don't know about this letter, or they know about it and they're not talking about it. In 2018, they were asking John Sullivan, we are very concerned. Look at this. It's particularly troubling that much of the Nazi glorification in Ukraine is government supported. But here they sit today when you bring this up and you mention this to the politicians, you mention it to the House of Representatives. When people brought this up during the Biden administration, they said that's false. That's not true. We don't know what you're talking about. Let's see who signed this letter. You see, they think people forget, right? Because look, Ro Khanna, we'll point out some of the people you guys may know. Gerald Nadler, Adam Smith, Mark Pocan. Who else do we have? I'm just pointing out some of the ones you may know. Pramila Jayapal, Jamie Raskin. All these people tried to play dumb. It's a game, fam. Look at this. Eleanor Holmes Norton, Brenda Lawrence, Matt Cartwright, James McGovern. Any other ones people may recognize? Ted Lieu. You know? And I mean, it's a number of people. It's not like it was just a couple of signatures. That's the thing. Sheila Jackson Lee, to name a few. So, but none of these people, this is what I'm trying to tell you, when this was brought up as a concern, none of these people wanted to talk about this in Ukraine. They knew it was a problem. They've been lying for the longest time. And one thing I do agree with Trump on is ending that war with Russia and Ukraine, right? But what killed me were the Democrats who tried to pretend like they didn't know this was an issue in Ukraine when they're on this letter. 2018, right? Okay. Wesley Bell is another one. Wesley Bell, if there ain't a sellout, he's the sellout of sellouts. Actually, Cory Booker's number one. We'll put him at number two. Wesley Bell is new, but he did the lowest of the lowest of the low because he got that seat from Cori Bush because he was willing to sell his soul to AIPAC. And here he is right here. Another one. Look who's spreading the message. It's coming from AIPAC. Thank you, Wesley Bell. All right. Listen to this.
Congressman Wesley Bell here. So happy to be here supporting our Jewish brothers and sisters. This relationship is so important because it is vital that we stand by our fellow democracies. So I'm proud to support our Israeli brothers and sisters. I'm proud to stand with our allies, and it's just so important that we work together and continue to build on such a strong relationship.
Work together to do what? Right? So let me get this straight, fam. Wesley Bell sold his soul to AIPAC And here he is speaking up for protecting Israel. And the way that he got there was by kicking a black woman out of her seat. Let me say this again, folks. Wesley Bell sold his soul to AIPAC to kick a black woman out of her seat so that he can go to Congress and fight for Israel. Because that's what this is really about, fam. Okay. So not everybody who is there that you can point to and say that's representation is there fighting for issues that are part of the black community. Most of them are there to put Israel first. That includes Jim Clyburn too. You put him in that same category because you live in one of the poorest districts in this country, but you living just fine. They're sellouts. They're not there to help black issues. They're not there to elevate black voices. They are there to make you think you have someone there to represent you, but their agenda is Israel first. Now, I had many criticisms of Cori Bush not pushing back on Dem leadership as much as I wanted her to. Actually, all the squad members. But she was one of the first ones to stand up for Gaza. She was one of the ones who was still talking about defunding the police because that is something that directly affects her district. That being said, AIPAC sat up here and they used another black person against her. So when we talk about how we're going to improve things for people in this country, in particular black people in this country, one of the things that we got to come to acknowledge right off the bat, we can't fall for these tricks where other people are using black people to work against other black people. And that's exactly what happened with Wesley Bell. He's a sellout. Him, Hakeem Jeffries, who's the other? Cory Booker, Raphael Warnock. These people are sellouts and they're clowns. And you have to start calling them what it is. Stop being nice to them. Stop trying to take a picture and be their buddy. Stop all of this. They're not there for you. And if you just look at the money trail, you can see it as clear as day. Look at this. He sold his soul. This dude, and you're new, he's new. Already getting over 12 million. That's how much. And even some of the older members of Congress didn't get that much. That's how much they bought him for. So you're not free if you're still being bought, okay? Say it with me, ladies and gentlemen. You think you're free? You're not free if you're still being bought. And that's exactly what they did to Wesley Bell. They bought you, but Wesley went along with it because Wesley wanted that job. Wesley wanted to be up in DC and have that seat. Wesley was willing to take the nod and go along with white supremacy. And yes, Israel is a supremacist project. He was willing to go along with it to kick a black woman out of her seat. So no, if you thought that Wesley was going to be there to fight for the black community, no, he was never there to fight for you. He was sent there to fight for Israel. They put him up against her because she went against Israel. And they said, we'll find a black person who will say, yes, master. And that person was Wesley. They're sellouts. This man should be really ashamed. Raphael Warnock can be ashamed, but this guy should be really, really ashamed. But he's not. He just want to be part of the club. Sellout, sellout. people have to understand that at the end of the day, it's all corporate. It's all about money. You think you got two political parties, you really got one corporate party. And that one corporate party buys people. And if you're bought, you're not free. And if you're not free, you do not have liberation. You cannot liberate yourself, let alone your people. How is Wesley Bell going to liberate people in St. Louis? He can't liberate himself. His hands are tied to AIPAC right now. That's who he belongs to. You would turn against people who are occupied, people who are oppressed, to stand with the oppressor. You are not representation, Wesley Bell. You are an Uncle Tom. And that's what we're going to call them. People can say whatever they want to about me. I have never sat up here and told you to support Israel. I have never sat up here and told you to go support Ukraine. And we all grow and we all learn. And then there are some that are not trying to grow and learn. There are some that are deceiving on purpose so that they can get paid. And that's people like Wesley Bell, and that's people like Raphael Warnock, and that's people like Cori Bush and Hakeem Jeffries. These people ain't worried about you. These people will sell you down the river and protect Israel over you, boo. Anytime you were willing to take the money and sit up there and push a black woman out of her seat, you weren't thinking about helping black people. You were thinking about your pockets. So sometimes it happens in the Republican Party, and sometimes it happens in the Democratic Party. One corporate party. And that's just what I want people to understand. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.